Technology has this huge potential to have an impact in healthcare, but so often it misses the mark. Tools get abandoned, systems don't connect, and we end up with these clunky workflows and awkward interactions, which are just not it for patients and clinicians. But we can do better. We've all been there and seen it, these band-aid solutions to fix workflows and have these messy workarounds just to get it done. It doesn't have to be this way, but it's hard. So how do we build technology that actually works for all the stakeholders in healthcare? Today I'm attending a special future-led panel hosted at the Clinical Skills Development Service at Metro North Health in Brisbane. This event's hosted by THT Plus partners Liquid, where they brought together clinicians and designers to explore how better collaboration, smarter procurement, and system reform can create technology that truly supports an effective healthcare system. So yeah, these are my people. Up on this stage at this event, we heard from Dr. Jason Brown, Chief Digital Health Officer for Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital, Dr. Rae Donovan, Acting Chief Clinical Information Officer for eHealth Queensland, Dr. Mia McLanders, Manager of Research and Innovation at the Clinical Skills Development Service, and Fiona Armstrong, CEO of Liquid, in a panel session moderated by Kate Wylie, the Director of Health at Liquid. In this episode of Talking HealthTech, you'll hear insights from that panel, as well as some behind-the-scenes interviews I recorded before and after the session, the kind of stuff that you don't always hear on the stage. So if you're building or buying or battling with healthcare technology, by the end of this episode, you'll have a clearer picture and maybe even a bit of optimism on how we can do better and create experiences and outcomes that clinicians and patients really want and need. Collaboration starts with a conversation, Team HealthTech. Let's make it happen. So here's the problem. So often in healthcare, the technology just doesn't hit the mark. So let's first explore this idea that technology is often bolted on after the fact rather than solving a real need. Let's get to the root of why things really miss the mark and learn to spot the difference between innovation and improvement. Let's start with the big picture. Why does this keep happening? As Dr. Jason Brown put it on the panel, healthcare is under pressure from all angles. Workforce, money, infrastructure, you name it. So when we throw technology into that mess without fixing the foundation, it doesn't matter how clever it is, it's probably not going to work.
The challenges of healthcare are universal and well known. We have escalating demand, both from ageing population and the fact we get better at keeping people alive. We have a workforce shortage because of that ageing population and the participation rate. We have a dollar problem. We just don't have enough money to do what we need to do, as a lot of these new technologies cost more money. And we have an infrastructure problem. We haven't got enough beds built and we can't build enough quick enough. So all of those things add together to equal a major wicked challenge. We are in Australia a little bit lucky because we've got net migration into the country, which skews that demographic. You look at other countries who have net emigration like Europe and Asia, and they're feeling a lot more pain than we are at the moment. But they're also, when you look at them, they're way ahead of the curve in terms of leveraging digital to solve those problems. And I think we haven't had that come to Jesus moment yet, where we have to do other things or we'll fail, but we're not far off that. So we're not there yet in terms of working out what we need to do, but we need to look at other lessons overseas to learn that.
Later in the discussion, Jason called out something that we've all seen before, where the solution comes first, and then someone's got to go hunting for the problem to attach to it. This innovation might have won a grant or look cool in a lab, but on the ground, it just doesn't connect.
Look, I think, at the clinical coalface, people understand the problems well. They live them every day. But I think those problems don't often filter down to, the other areas. It's the same in research in medicine and innovation. Medicine is built on innovation. And that lab or bench to bedside timelines are measured in decades. On average, it's 15 years. And that's the traditional kind of pathway in medicine. There's many checks and balances. there's animal trials, human trials, regulation. So we're very used to that. And, in that space, as part of the research I do with burns, I have identified when you go to universities or all of the grant systems are driven towards people looking for cool stuff, coming up with cool science, coming up with cool technology. But when you actually look at it, you go, well, what problem is it solving? So there's a lot of solutions and cool stuff that's being discovered and driven by grants and driven by the research machinery that actually has no problem attached to it. So then they find something and they go, okay, what are we going to do with this?
And this is the thing, just because something looks cool on the surface doesn't mean it's going to work in practice. Dr. Rae Donovan summed it up nicely. It's easy to build something new, but much harder to make it usable and scalable and actually stick in the system.
We come up with ideas and it's really cool and it's fun and it looks great and it solves a problem for a question that someone came up with, a research mindset. But how do you actually put that into practice? That's where we often fail. And so we have a lot of new things that have been designed or considered or proposed, but it's not necessarily translatable. And I think that's the challenge that we currently have.
After the panel, I spoke to Rae and I asked her, why are there still so many health tech systems that feel clunky or outdated in this day and age? We've basically just built a Frankenstein stack where we've got a pile of tech that's taped together on top of legacy systems.
So I think healthcare is an interesting space. We now actually build a lot of our systems on top of old systems. So it's actually almost like a really horrible jigsaw puzzle that's been masking taped together. But yeah, at the moment, I think we're just building blocks on old building blocks and just doing the best we can.
And when tech is built before the real world problem's really understood, you can spot the signs a mile away.
You can always tell when it hasn't solved the problem because either people don't use it, they use it slightly differently, and people actually just keep doing what they've always done. And it can be a combination of things. I think either we've just pulled something off the shelf and plugged it in and we haven't actually understood the workflow, we haven't understood the business, we haven't understood the problem. Sometimes we've missed the mark because we've actually made it for the clinicians when we actually need it for the consumers. Or worse, it's actually more around being able to capture the data. And the problem is sometimes we actually put things in because we're actually wanting to see the output, but if we actually haven't hit the mark in terms of how people are actually entering data or actually using it on their day-to-day business, then you're not going to get the output.
Rae explained how solving one problem in isolation can accidentally break 5 others, especially in such a tightly interconnected system.
Healthcare is so interconnected that from a medical point of view, I work so closely with my nursing staff that work so closely with the allied health staff that work with the consumer, that it's actually all interrelated. And so emergency has impacts on surgery, surgery has impacts on the inpatient space and so forth like that. So solving one part of the problem without thinking of the whole part means that you might fix an aspect in the surgical field, but it may have a flow-on effect to the inpatient space, to the allied health individuals and so forth like that. So that's usually the repercussions of not actually doing the whole, actually sort of broad, big picture, who else is going to be impacted by this change.
So what did we learn? Health tech doesn't live in a vacuum. It lives in a messy, interconnected system. You can't just plug in a shiny new tool and expect magic. If the foundations are crumbling, then tech just becomes another band-aid, or worse, it adds to the chaos. As Rae said, the trick is to stop building tech in isolation and start designing with the whole system in mind. The workflows, the people, and yes, even the knock-on effects that no one wants to deal with. Innovation is great, but if it doesn't improve anything, what's the point? So we all know that a bolt-on solution in healthcare is just a band-aid fix. So we need everything to be structured and standardized, but the problem is, in healthcare, for it to be human, it needs to feel local and bespoke. So how do we make it feel special and personalized while also scalable and sustainable? Fiona Armstrong, CEO of Liquid, was on the panel, and she spelt out why the big bang system swaps rarely move the needle.
How do we actually start to create that sort of parallel stream of activity that enables us not to just suddenly think about what we might want to do when the notional system replacement opportunity comes up and we suddenly have budget to actually think about things Because it's almost too late by that point in time. We need to be thinking about, what is that vision? Where do we want to get to? How do the pieces of this puzzle fit together? How do we build the capability, the capacity, the thinking to sort of start to create that? Because what we see all too often, as we're sort of all channeled through procurement processes, is that sort of recreation of the existing. So we'll have a new system, but it'll do exactly the same as the old system did. And we will miss the opportunity to really innovate and take that change. So I think we just need to start thinking about, how do we create the time and the space and the capability to enable people to actually, think ahead, imagine what the future will look like, build that digital literacy so that it's not a scary thing and it's something that is seen as sort of critical to actually enabling better healthcare in the future.
So if you don't do your innovation and strategic thinking until there's money in the bank, the chances are all you're going to do is rebuild yesterday's system with a different wrapper. Dr. Mia McLanders, who runs the Quill Living Lab, picked up on Fiona's thread and showed us how ignoring the real-world nuance can kill scale.
In healthcare, often we find that our technologies are designed for work as imagined rather than work as done. And there's a real disconnect that can happen there. Recently, we had a client come through the lab that we have here, and they had a fantastic new product that they've been using in a different environment to keep patients warm. And they were wanting to bring it into a healthcare setting. And in the environment that they were using it in, they were actually only using it. They'd only validated on men. But what we need, obviously, with patient population, we need to make sure we're validating that on women and children and all kinds of different patient populations. And so I think it's, again, now that's a case of just adapting something, as Rae was saying, from a different context. We do need to contextualize it for the local context, but I think it's also about that disconnect sometimes between designers not really having access to the clinicians in the clinical space to really understand the nuances and the needs of each individual area. We're a big fan of standardization in healthcare. That has its strengths, but it also has its limitations. And I think we need to be careful about sort of that Band-Aid one-size-fits-all solution for things.
You see that all too often in healthcare, don't we? When a product's validated on a particular patient cohort, but then when it's scaled out more broadly, it loses all its relevance. After the panel, I grabbed Dr. Jason Brown, and his view was that local brilliance still needs that system-wide plumbing.
Look, I mean, it's a simple answer. I mean, all of these local solutions are highly dependent on some really foundational infrastructure, and that can be around data, it could be about patient identifiers, it can be around about that interoperability layer for other solutions. So you can have this perfect solution that's fit for purpose, you drop it into that particular area, but if it can't connect to data, it can't identify the patients, it can't communicate with them, it can't give that information to other clinicians that sit outside of that service, it's useless.
Yeah.
And I think where we trip up is that behind the scenes infrastructure and capability, because you can't rely on a local solution to deliver that.
And the fact of the matter is, innovation needs funding. But so often that funding gets allocated to boutique or Band-Aid fixes. So how do we get more of that funding into the foundational work to help us build from that?
This is a challenge for government, because reinventing the wheel is what we're good at. We're good at point solutions, we're good at tactical solutions, we're good at, hey, we've got some leftover money, we've got 3 months, let's throw it at this problem which you keep whinging about or you keep bringing up year after year. Instead of this bigger vision around, okay, we need to build these fit-for-purpose foundational systems that support all these smaller things, but that's going to take many $1 million and many, many years. Oh, no, we don't have funding for that this year. And I think we turn into this rat race, this hamster wheel of failure.
Yeah. So my 3 key takeaways around this scaling dilemma of local innovation and system reform. Number 1, parallel discovery, not panic procurement. So map the future before the budget window opens. Number 2, design for the messy reality. Test on the full spectrum of users, not just a convenient sample. And number 3, we need to invest in the plumbing. So data standards, patient IDs, and interoperability, they all make or break every local pilot. Great technology never happens in a vacuum. The magic really happens when designers, clinicians, and policymakers share the same whiteboard from day one. And we know we need to involve clinicians and users when we're designing solutions, but let's be clear, there's a difference between a quick check-in with a clinician on a product development and genuine co-design. And that gap decides whether a project flies or fizzles. During the panel, Dr. Jason Brown reminded us that tech teams can't sit in the basement anymore. They have to be part of the care team.
You need to bring in those data scientists, those cybersecurity, information security people, those integration specialists, the solution architects into those teams. So they are now part of that healthcare delivery team. And that's a real change in culture. And I guess, from Metro North, as part of our preparation for rolling out IMR across our facilities, we invested in that clinical informatics kind of capability. It's not by accident they put me in charge of IT. We've got nurses, allied health, other people that work hand in hand with business analysts, solution architects, data analytics. And, that's the only way to deliver something successfully in an IT world. Because if you disconnect, then you're not going to get the solutions to the problems you need.
And that is partnership. Shared problems is shared accountability. And as Dr. Rae Donovan said, we need to level up from multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary teams.
We often refer to multidisciplinary teams when in actual fact we should be talking about interdisciplinary teams. And it's become more and more apparent as we sort of introduce technology. We've got some very savvy people that are either data analysts or scientists. We've got the clinical informaticians that really sort of understand how to sort of look at systems and how to do the adoption aspect. We've got our human factors people. We've got there's this vast array of people that can actually help us sort of implement and, analyse what is the actual problem. Let's sort of step through it. What do we actually need to do? What's the right design? How do we deploy it and so forth? And how do we actually bring them into the team on a day-to-day basis? And in terms of what I was saying to Kate, in terms of interdisciplinarily means that I, as the medical officer, actually do understand a bit about the physio aspect. I'm not the expert, but I can actually we can actually have a bit better conversation because we actually understand a little bit of everybody's things, but we respect people's specialty. And I think we need to get better at that.
And that handoff is where most projects will bleed momentum. But how do you keep everyone in the same room? I put that problem to Fiona Armstrong from Liquid after the panel, and her take, collaboration is easy to say, but it's hard to do.
So yeah, collaboration is a really easy word to say, but a hard word to do. But it is absolutely vital. And I think certainly in the context of today's conversation where we're talking about that sort of healthcare and the involvement of clinicians, that's particularly hard because their time is so precious and so often tied to the immediacy and the emergency of the situation in front of them. So actually creating a collaborative space that can take them away from that and actually enable them to articulate what they're experiencing and think more broadly about the potential rather than being trapped in the day-to-day is really where the art of collaboration comes in. And then bringing that together with a range of different perspectives so that we get that same depth of understanding of all of the different perspectives from all of the different stakeholders that are involved. And having the independence of a sort of a trusted designer that can then actually listen to all of those perspectives and synthesize them in a way that is true to everybody's intent, but is not biased towards a particular point of view to create the best possible outcome.
So the trick is carving out protected, meaningful time for clinicians and providing an unbiased facilitator to synthesize every voice. Kate Wylie from Liquid, who's also a clinician, said that engagement is not a calendar problem, it's a relevance problem.
When we engage them on, or we reach out to them on something that really means something to them, they make time. And I think that's the key difference is if you're not getting the responsiveness you need, is it really a problem that they're interested in? Is it really a problem we should be solving? And so it becomes not a problem if we're actually reaching out to them on something meaningful.
So the bottom line is, if the problem is real, clinicians will make the time. And that's when co-design turns into real ownership. So 3 takeaways from this section is embed the tech tribe, bring data, security, and integration specialists into the teams. Think interdisciplinary, because shared language beats siloed expertise. Meaningfulness always beats convenience. So when the problem actually matters, clinicians will show up and the co-design will stick. With your health tech solution, say you've done all the co-design and you think you've done all the testing, it's time to put it into a clinical setting. Well, that's where the real test begins, because even the smartest technology will tank if no one uses it. And the adoption of technology isn't about the really thick training manuals. It's about the people, the workflow, and the culture. Let's unpack why some great technology just doesn't get adopted at wider scale and what to fix before you roll it out. First, Fiona gave us a firm reality check. It's not even about the technology. It's about the people.
The challenge that we've got, and this goes across health and broader government, is that we often start from that sort of technology first landscape. And actually, it's not technology that makes change, it's people that make change. Technology just enables it, but our practices, our processes, our systems, our governance actually push us in a direction that doesn't enable that sort of freedom of thinking.
It's pretty clear that adoption lives or dies on the culture that you've built around the technology. Dr. Rae Donovan explained that just training them harder never really sticks. It's not that clinicians and people aren't willing to learn or change, it's just we've got a lot of healthcare to do right now. So how do you balance both?
Actually, it's trying to balance the whole, we need to deliver healthcare, but we actually need to, in a parallel way, be able to stop, pause, put mind, and actually change how we do things. And I think that's the bit that we're struggling with, because there is a workforce shortage. There's actually too many people to see. There's not enough space to actually see them. You're just trying to put fires out, but at the same time, you really want somebody to be walking alongside you to actually find a different way to do it and help me actually transition.
And that concept of walking alongside users is exactly what Mia McLanders spends her days doing at the Queensland Innovation Living Lab. In my interview with her after the panel, she emphasised that it's important to not always blame the people when something goes wrong. Often human error can stem back to poor design in the technology.
Clinical champions are vitally important, and I think the way we create champions for technology is to design it so that it supports them. It's as simple as that. And I think they embrace technology that works for them, and then they talk about it. It's the same as we do in everyday life. If you've got a new app or a new piece of equipment that's making your life easier and making the things that you typically do that much better, you're going to tell all your friends about it. And that's what happens with our clinical champions as well.
And there's that elusive question. We know that successful implementation requires you to have a clinical champion or a human on the other side cheering on your deployment. But how do you find those champions, though? Well, you build the technology to fit the workflow.
We see certain devices and technologies that are, repeat offenders in terms of clinical incidents and patient harm. And the traditional safety approach is to really, as you say, shine the spotlight on the clinician. What's their deficit? Where are they failing? And then the solution is either more policy or more training for that. And we know that from the literature as well, that, around 75% of the time with clinical incidents, the outcome will be human error, and it will be more policy, more training. But what we're increasingly seeing as we're coming through with the Quill Lab is that we're bringing in devices that are repeat offenders, and we're able to identify where the source of that user interface problem is. And it is with the technology, it is with the design. And so by appropriately addressing the problem, what we're able to do is actually reduce the risk and have more effective solutions for that.
And I guess it's simple when you put it that way. If you build technology that people like, they'll do the selling for you. So to wrap up this section, adoption is a design problem, not a rollout problem. Get the fit right and the champions will appear. Get it wrong and you'll be ordering another round of mandatory training. So 3 quick takeaways from this part. People first, tech second. Create time, headspace and skills before the go live. Walk the floor. Clinicians adopt when support's embedded in their daily scramble, not bolted on after hours. And number 3, fix the interface and not the user. Repeat incidents often trace back to poor design. Solve that and champions emerge naturally. So let's bring this home. We started with the problem. Health tech that's bolted on, not built in. A patchwork of tools that don't always fit the job or the people using them. Then we got into the dilemma. How do we scale great ideas without losing the context that makes them actually work? We looked at the method, true collaboration, not just token consultation. And then we wrapped up with adoption, the bit everyone underestimates, where good ideas either stick or they stall. What's clear is that doing healthcare technology better isn't just about building better software. It's about the mindset, the systems, the culture, and the relationships. It's hard work, but we've seen in this episode that the people doing it do exist. The designers, the clinicians, the policy people, we just need to keep getting them into the same room. Because when we do, we don't just make better technology, we make healthcare better for the people who give the care and the people who need it. Massive thanks to our THT Plus company partners Liquid for helping make this episode possible, and to the Quill Living Lab at the Clinical Skills Development Service at Metro North Health in Brisbane for hosting such a great event that brought all these different voices together. If you enjoyed this episode, or maybe it gave you some optimism on how we can do healthcare better with technology, share it with someone that needs to hear it. And for more stories, insights, and conversations like this, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter or our podcast on your favourite platform. My name's Peter Birch. I'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking HealthTech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.